Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. What if I told you that the most attractive men in the room aren't always the richest, the loudest, or the most flashy, but the ones who move with quiet certainty? The kind of man who doesn't chase validation, doesn't announce his worth, and doesn't need money to feel powerful. You've felt this before. You've noticed how some people naturally draw respect, attention, even admiration without trying too hard. No flexing, no proving, just presence. That's not luck. And it's definitely not money, it's habits. Subtle ones, invisible to most people but impossible to ignore once you develop them. These are the behaviors that change how others feel around you before you ever say a word. They shift your energy, your posture, your decisions, and over time they compound into something far more valuable than status or wealth: inner authority. In this video, I'm breaking down 10 habits that quietly make you more attractive than money ever could. Not surface-level tricks, not fake confidence. Real, internal shifts that change how you're perceived and how you carry yourself through the world. Watch this till the very end. Don't skim, don't rush it. One habit alone can change how people see you, but together they reshape who you become. Number 1, you speak less, but every word carries weight. You speak less, but when you do, people feel it. Not because you're trying to impress, not because you're clever with words, but because silence has trained you. In a world that talks non-stop, you've chosen restraint, and restraint sharpens everything. When you stop filling every gap with noise, your words stop competing for attention. They land clean, they linger. You begin to understand something most people never do. Attraction doesn't come from being heard the most, it comes from being remembered. When you speak less, you're not shrinking yourself. You're concentrating yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be silent for the most part, or speak only when you must, and then briefly." That wasn't advice for monks hiding from the world. It was instruction for power. You don't need volume when you have weight. You don't need constant expression when your presence already says enough. Think about how often you speak without intention, filling silence, explaining too much, justifying things that don't need justification. Every unnecessary word leaks value. Seneca warned, "Nature gave us one tongue and 2 ears so we could hear twice as much as we speak." That's not about being passive, it's about being selective. When you train yourself to pause before speaking, you start filtering your thoughts. You begin asking a simple but brutal question: does this need to be said? And if the answer is no, you let it go. That act alone changes how people perceive you. You stop sounding reactive. You stop sounding needy. You start sounding grounded. And grounding is attractive in a way money can't fake. When every word carries weight, it's because you've learned to sit with your thoughts instead of dumping them on others. You've practiced internal discipline. You let ideas mature before releasing them. That patience shows. People feel it even if they can't name it. You're no longer speaking to be validated or noticed. You're speaking because there's something worth placing into the space. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Listening is not submission, it's dominance over impulse. And impulse is what makes most people predictable, noisy, and forgettable. This habit asks you to slow down, not just externally but mentally, to stop reacting instantly, to let silence do some of the work for you. Silence makes people lean in. It creates tension. It forces others to reveal themselves. And the more comfortable you become with it, the more authority you project without effort. You don't rush to answer. You don't rush to defend. You don't rush to impress. You respond when you're ready, That timing alone changes everything. Words spoken too quickly are cheap. Words spoken after thought feel expensive. Here's where the work begins. Start noticing how often you interrupt your own power by talking too much, not out loud, internally. Notice the urge, the itch to respond immediately. The discomfort that silence brings up. Sit with it, breathe through it. Remind yourself that you don't owe the world a constant performance. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you always own the option of having no opinion. That single idea can save you from hundreds of weak moments. You don't need to comment on everything. You don't need to react to everything. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. When you let that sink in, your words begin to rise in value naturally. A practical exercise for you: for the next few days, reduce your verbal output by 1/3. Not by becoming cold or withdrawn, but by cutting filler. Cut repetition. Cut over-explaining. Before you speak, silently count to 3. If the thought still feels solid, say it. If it fades, let it go. Another exercise: practice ending sentences sooner. Say what matters, then stop. Let the silence sit. Don't rush to fill it. Let your words stand on their own. You'll feel awkward at first. That's normal. Growth often feels like tension before it feels like strength. There's another layer to this habit that most people miss. Speaking less forces you to listen more deeply, and deep listening changes you. You stop waiting for your turn to talk. You stop rehearsing responses. You start absorbing tone, pauses, subtext. You understand more with fewer words. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." The same applies to speech. When your words are everywhere, they carry no gravity. When they're rare, they pull people in. This isn't about being mysterious. It's about being intentional. You'll notice something subtle happen as you adopt this habit. People begin to check themselves around you. They speak more carefully. They listen longer, not because you demand it, but because your presence sets a tone. You've trained yourself to respect silence, so others follow suit. That's quiet authority. That's attraction that doesn't announce itself. And it's built from discipline, not flash. Another exercise: journal your thoughts before you speak them, especially the emotional ones. Write them out privately. See how many lose urgency once they're out of your head. This trains discernment. It teaches you that not every thought deserves a voice. Epictetus warned, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. When you speak less, you give yourself time to become the person you're aiming at, instead of sabotaging yourself with careless words. This habit also builds trust. When you speak less, people know that when you do speak, it matters. You're not background noise, you're signal, and signal cuts through chaos. In a world addicted to oversharing, restraint feels refreshing. In a culture obsessed with expression, self-control stands out. You don't need to advertise your value, you embody it. So practice silence, practice pauses, practice letting moments breathe. Let your words earn their place. Let your voice become something people wait for instead of something they tune out. This isn't about becoming quiet, it's about becoming precise. And precision is attractive in ways that money, status, and noise will never replicate. Number 2, you keep your emotions steady under pressure. When pressure shows up, most people leak themselves all over the moment. Their tone shifts, their body tightens, their thoughts scatter. You can feel the static in the air. And without a word being said, something subtle happens. Attraction drains, respect thins out. Not because emotion is weakness, but because uncontrolled emotion signals instability. You don't need to be loud, rich, dominant, or impressive to stand out. You need to be steady. When you keep your emotions grounded under pressure, you become rare, quietly magnetic. the kind of presence people trust without fully knowing why. This isn't about suppressing how you feel. Stoicism never asked you to become a stone. Marcus Aurelius warned against that exact misunderstanding. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That line isn't poetic fluff, it's a practical instruction. Pressure is inevitable, chaos is guaranteed. What changes everything is whether your inner state becomes a hostage to what's happening or whether it stays anchored. When you don't let urgency hijack your nervous system, you communicate safety. And safety is attractive at a level deeper than logic. People relax around you. They listen. They lean in. You already know this instinctively. When someone reacts too fast, too sharp, too emotionally, you feel it immediately. Something contracts inside you. You may not label it, but your body knows. Now reverse it. When you slow your emotional response, when you create space between stimulus and reaction, your presence expands. Epictetus put it simply, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That pause, even a breath-long pause, is power. In that space, you choose who you are going to be instead of letting circumstances decide for you. Keeping your emotions steady doesn't mean you never feel stress, frustration, or pressure. It means you stop advertising it. You stop letting every internal fluctuation broadcast itself outward. You stop confusing honesty with emotional leakage. There's a difference between being authentic and being unregulated. One builds attraction, the other erodes it. When pressure rises and you stay composed, people assume competence. They assume confidence. They assume you've been here before, even if you haven't. This habit is built quietly from the inside out. Start by noticing how quickly your emotions try to move your mouth, your face, your posture. Awareness comes first, not judgment, just noticing. The Stoics called this prosach, attention to the present moment. Throughout your day, practice catching the first wave instead of drowning in it. You don't need to act on every feeling. You don't need to explain it. You don't even need to resolve it immediately. Let it exist without letting it steer. A simple daily exercise: when you feel pressure rise, silently name the sensation instead of the story. Not "this is bad" or "this shouldn't be happening," but tightness, heat, restlessness. This pulls you out of reaction and back into observation. Observation creates distance. Distance creates choice. Choice creates composure. Do this enough times and emotional steadiness becomes muscle memory, not effort. Another practice is voluntary discomfort, something the Stoics were deeply fond of. Seneca advised occasionally rehearsing hardship so that it loses its power over you. Not because suffering is noble, but because familiarity dissolves fear. You can practice staying calm in small moments of inconvenience. You can train yourself to remain internally slow while the external world pushes you to rush. Over time, your nervous system learns a new baseline. Calm becomes your default instead of your exception. What makes this habit so quietly attractive is that it signals self-trust. You're not scrambling for control because you already have it internally. You're not trying to dominate the moment because you're not threatened by it. There's a groundedness in that which no amount of money can replicate. Money can impress. Emotional stability reassures. And reassurance runs deeper than admiration. It creates loyalty. It creates respect that doesn't need to be demanded. There's also something deeply freeing about not being ruled by emotional weather. When you stop letting pressure yank you around, you conserve energy. You think clearer. You speak less, but with more weight. Your words land because they're not tangled in urgency. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In modern terms, the best response to pressure is not to mirror its chaos. Calm is not passive. Calm is defiance. To strengthen this habit, build a short daily reflection. At the end of the day, ask yourself where you stayed steady and where you didn't, not to criticize, but to refine. The Stoics treated the mind like a workshop, not a courtroom. Improvement comes from honest review, not self-attack. Over time, patterns reveal themselves. Triggers lose their mystery. And once something loses its mystery, it loses much of its power. You don't need to announce your composure. You don't need to perform it. The more quietly you practice it, the more visible it becomes. People notice who doesn't panic, who doesn't rush, who doesn't emotionally flinch. They may not say it out loud, but they feel safer in your presence. And safety, when paired with self-command, becomes attraction that doesn't fade with circumstance. Pressure will never stop testing you. That's not a flaw in life. That's the training ground. Each moment is an invitation to either outsource your state to the world or to reclaim it for yourself. When you choose steadiness again and again, you become someone whose value isn't shaken by noise. Someone whose attractiveness isn't tied to status, wealth, or external wins. Someone whose presence alone carries weight. And that kind of attraction doesn't announce itself. It settles into the room before you do. Number 3, you respect yourself even when no one is watching. You respect yourself even when no one is watching. And that quiet discipline changes everything about how you move through the world. This isn't the loud kind of self-respect that needs validation or applause. It's the private kind. The kind that shows up in the moments where no one would ever know if you cut corners, lowered your standards, or betrayed your own word. You don't do it anyway. Not because you're afraid of consequences, but because something inside you refuses to rot just to make life easier. And that inner refusal creates a gravity that no amount of money can replicate. When you respect yourself in private, you stop negotiating with your weaker impulses. You stop asking, "Will anyone find out?" and start asking, "Is this who I want to be?" That shift sounds subtle, but it rewires your identity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Respect yourself enough to do what is right, even when it is difficult." He wasn't talking about image. He was talking about integrity as a daily practice. You carry yourself differently when you know you don't abandon yourself behind closed doors. Your posture changes. Your voice steadies. Your decisions become cleaner. People may not know why they feel drawn to you, but they feel it. Self-respect in solitude builds internal alignment. You're not split into versions of yourself anymore, one for public display and one for private decay. There's only you. The same standards apply whether the lights are on or off. That consistency creates calm. Seneca warned, "Be careful what you let into your character, for it is shaped in secrecy." Every small choice you make alone is a vote for the person you're becoming. Over time, those votes compound. You don't need to pretend to be confident. Confidence becomes the side effect of knowing you can trust yourself. This habit also sharpens your boundaries without you ever having to announce them. When you respect yourself privately, you don't tolerate disrespect publicly. Not because you're aggressive, but because your nervous system isn't trained to accept scraps. You've already practiced saying no to yourself. Saying no to the world becomes effortless. You don't chase approval. You don't over-explain. You don't contort yourself to fit rooms that don't deserve you. That restraint reads as depth. That depth reads as attraction. There's something deeply magnetic about someone who doesn't need witnesses to behave with honor. It signals emotional maturity. It signals self-leadership. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." You're not waiting to feel motivated. You're not waiting to be seen. You act in alignment because you've already decided who you are. That certainty is rare, and rarity is always attractive. You build this habit the same way you build muscle, through repetition in unglamorous moments. Start by tightening your personal agreements. If you say you'll do something, especially something small, do it. Not for productivity, for identity. Each kept promise strengthens self-trust. Each broken one erodes it. Respect grows where trust is consistent. Another practice is to clean up your inner dialogue. The way you speak to yourself when you fail matters. Self-respect doesn't mean self-cruelty. It means correction without humiliation. Firm, calm, and forward-moving. Train yourself to pause before indulgence. Not to deny pleasure, but to choose it consciously. Ask yourself, does this move me toward the person I respect? If the answer is no, walk away without drama. That pause is power. It's proof you're not enslaved by impulse. Write this question down and return to it daily. Let it interrupt you. Let it refine you. Create one daily ritual that exists purely for your standards, not for results. Something simple, something unshared. Commit to it for 30 days. Miss a day, restart. This isn't punishment, it's practice. You're teaching yourself that your word matters even when there's no audience. Over time, you'll notice something shift. You'll feel less scattered, less needy, more grounded. That groundedness is felt by everyone around you. Finally, remind yourself often of this Stoic truth. Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. Respect isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's built quietly, reinforced daily, and carried effortlessly. When you respect yourself in the dark, you don't need to shine in the light. People sense it. They respond to it. And long after money loses its glow, this kind of self-respect keeps pulling others toward you without you ever trying. Number 4, you walk away from what disrespects you without explaining. You reach a point, quietly, without ceremony, where you stop negotiating with disrespect. Not because you're angry, not because you want to prove something, but because something in you has settled. You've learned that your time, your energy, your inner order are not up for debate. And when something crosses that line, you don't launch into explanations or rehearsed speeches. You don't defend your decision like it's on trial. You simply step back, you walk away. This habit doesn't shout, it doesn't posture, but it changes how you're felt in a room. People sense it. There's a gravity to someone who doesn't beg to be treated well. You don't chase closure. You don't ask for permission to protect yourself. You move on calmly, and that restraint is magnetic. Most people talk too much at the moment they should be silent. They explain because they're afraid of being misunderstood. They justify because they want approval. You stop doing that. You realize that explaining is often a disguised form of seeking validation. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. So you choose clarity over chaos. You choose self-respect over being liked. You understand what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." You don't announce your boundaries. You embody them. Your actions say enough. Silence becomes your statement. And strangely, the less you say, the more seriously you're taken. Walking away without explaining doesn't mean you're cold. It means you're clear. It means you trust yourself enough not to over-communicate your worth. You understand that respect isn't negotiated through words, it's enforced through behavior. When something feels off, you don't intellectualize it to death. You don't convince yourself to tolerate what quietly erodes you. You listen to that internal signal and you act cleanly, decisively. There's no drama in it, no slammed doors, just absence. And absence, when chosen intentionally, is powerful. Seneca warned, no one can have a peaceful life who thinks too much about extending it. The same applies to dignity. You stop extending conversations, situations, and relationships that drain your sense of self. This habit rewires how you move through the world. You stop reacting. You stop needing the last word. You let go of the urge to correct every misunderstanding. You understand that not everyone deserves access to your reasoning. Some people only understand consequences. And walking away is not punishment, it's alignment. You're not trying to teach anyone a lesson. You're choosing yourself without fanfare. That's where the quiet attraction lies. It's in the self-containment, the composure, the unspoken message that says, I will not abandon myself to keep you comfortable. There's a calm confidence that grows when you practice this. You no longer feel the spike of anxiety when something crosses a line. You don't scramble for words. You don't rehearse arguments in your head hours later. You act in real time. And because you do, your nervous system starts to trust you. That trust changes how you stand, how you speak, how you pause. You become steadier, more grounded. Epictetus put it simply, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Walking away without explanation will sometimes be misunderstood. Let it be, you're not here to manage perceptions. You're here to live in integrity. This habit also teaches you restraint. You learn that not every reaction deserves oxygen. Not every disrespect deserves your emotional labor. You conserve your energy. You stop leaking it into situations that don't grow you. And that conservation shows. People are drawn to those who are not constantly depleted. There's an ease to you now, a measured pace. You're no longer performing self-respect, you're practicing it. And practice turns into identity. If you want to build this habit deliberately, start small. The next time you feel the urge to over-explain, pause. Literally pause, take one slow breath. Ask yourself one question, am I speaking to be clear or to be approved of? If it's the second, stop. Let the silence do the work. Another exercise is to write down your non-negotiables, not as rules for others, but as commitments to yourself. When one is crossed, rehearse the response of non-response. Visualize yourself disengaging calmly. No anger, no justification, just withdrawal. Train your mind to see walking away as strength, not avoidance. You can also practice verbal minimalism. When something feels disrespectful, reduce your words by half. Then by half again. Shorten your responses, slow them down. Notice how often clarity doesn't require explanation at all. Over time, you'll feel a shift. You'll stop needing to prove your standards. You'll feel them living in your body, in your posture, in your tone, in what you no longer tolerate. This habit doesn't make you harder, it makes you cleaner. It clears space. It sharpens your self-image. You stop seeing yourself as someone who must convince others of your value. You start seeing yourself as someone who already knows it. And that knowing is attractive in a way money can't touch, because it can't be bought. It can't be faked. It's earned through restraint, through discipline, through the courage to leave what diminishes you without a speech, without an audience, without applause. In the end, walking away without explaining is an act of trust. Trust in your judgment, trust in your worth. Trust that the right people don't need convincing and the wrong ones don't deserve your breath. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. You don't mirror disrespect with noise. You answer it with distance. And in that quiet distance, you become unmistakably, undeniably more attractive. Number 5, you listen fully instead of waiting to respond. When you truly listen, something subtle but powerful shifts inside you, not on the surface, not in a way that begs for attention. It's quieter than that. You stop treating conversations like competitions and start treating them like spaces. Space for understanding, space for presence, space for depth. And without trying to impress anyone, you become more compelling than someone who flashes status, wealth, or loud confidence. You become rare because most people aren't listening. They're loading their next sentence like a weapon, waiting for a pause so they can fire it off. You don't do that anymore. You stay. You give your attention fully. And attention, when it's undivided, is one of the most attractive currencies there is. Listening fully isn't about being passive. It's active restraint. It's the discipline to quiet your internal noise while someone else is speaking. You notice the urge to interrupt, to agree loudly, to correct, to steer the conversation back to yourself, and you let that urge pass. You don't chase it. You don't obey it. You simply stay present. That alone rewires how people experience you. They feel seen without you saying a word. They feel understood without you offering solutions. And the irony is that when you stop trying to sound interesting, you become unforgettable. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, most of what we say and do is not essential. If you can eliminate it, you'll have more time and more tranquility. Listening is exactly that elimination. Fewer words, more weight. You start to realize how much energy you used to waste rehearsing responses instead of absorbing meaning. Now you let words land. You let silence breathe. You don't rush to fill gaps. You don't treat pauses like threats. Silence becomes an ally. It gives your presence gravity. It tells the other person without announcing it that you're not anxious for validation. You're not desperate to be heard. You're grounded enough to hear first. And that groundedness is magnetic. People lean in, not because you're louder, but because you're steadier. This habit reshapes how you're perceived because it signals something deeper than politeness. It signals self-control. It signals confidence that doesn't need to perform. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and nowhere is that more obvious than in conversation. The imagined need to respond perfectly, to be clever, to prove something. Once you let that go, you become calmer, more fluid, more human. Your responses, when they do come, carry clarity instead of clutter, fewer words, better timing, stronger impact. You're no longer reacting, you're responding. And here's the part most people miss. Listening fully isn't just about others. It changes how you experience yourself. When you stop constantly projecting your thoughts outward, you become more aware of them. You catch your impulses before they escape your mouth. You notice patterns. You notice emotional spikes. You start choosing words instead of spilling them. Epictetus put it simply: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. That's not a polite suggestion. It's a strategy for power, quiet power, the kind that doesn't announce itself but is felt immediately. As you practice this, conversations stop feeling draining. You're not carrying the burden of constant performance. You're not chasing approval through cleverness. You're present, and presence is attractive because it's scarce. Anyone can talk. Few can stay fully attentive without drifting, defending, or dominating. When you do, people feel safe around you. Not because you agree with them, but because you're not trying to control the moment. You're allowing it. That ease, that lack of tension, creates a pull stronger than money ever could. To build this habit deliberately, start small and internal. Before any conversation, set a quiet intention. Listen to understand, not to reply, just that. During the conversation, anchor your attention to the sound and rhythm of the other person's words. When your mind wanders, and it will, bring it back gently. No frustration, no self-judgment, that's the exercise, awareness returning to the present. When you feel the urge to interrupt, label it silently and let it pass. When there's a pause, resist the reflex to fill it immediately. Let it exist. Let the moment settle. You'll notice how often deeper meaning surfaces in those gaps. Another practice is restraint. After someone finishes speaking, wait one full breath before responding. Just one. That breath creates space between impulse and action. Over time, that space grows, and in that space you gain control. You also gain respect quietly without asking for it. Your words land differently when they come from stillness instead of speed. You can also train yourself outside of conversations. Spend time each day in deliberate silence. No input, no noise, just you and your thoughts settling. This strengthens your ability to stay present when others speak. It sharpens your attention. It makes listening feel natural instead of forced. The Stoics valued this inner stillness because it made a person unshakable. When you're not constantly reacting, you're harder to move, harder to manipulate, harder to ignore. What makes this habit quietly powerful is that it compounds. The more you listen, the less you need external validation. The less you need validation, the more confident you become. And the more confident you become, the more attractive your presence feels. Not flashy, not loud, just solid. Like something that doesn't need to be explained. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, be content to seem what you really are. Listening fully aligns you with that truth. You stop trying to appear impressive and start being grounded. This isn't about disappearing or becoming silent forever. It's about timing, precision, intent. When you do speak, you're not dumping thoughts. You're offering something considered, something clean, something that actually adds weight to the moment. People remember that. They trust that. They're drawn to that, so practice it daily. Catch yourself when you're waiting to talk instead of listening. Slow down, breathe, stay. Let the other person finish completely. Let silence work for you. Over time, you'll notice the shift. Less effort, more pull. Less noise, more depth. And without money, without status, without trying to impress, you'll find yourself becoming quietly, unmistakably attractive. Number 6, you keep your promises, especially the small ones. When you keep your promises, especially the small ones, something quiet but powerful begins to change in you. Not in a loud, performative way. Not in a way that begs for approval. It's subtler than that. You start to move through life with less internal friction. Fewer excuses echoing in your head. Less bargaining with yourself. You say you'll do something and it gets done. That alone reshapes how you see yourself. And how you see yourself eventually becomes how others feel you, even if they can't explain why. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." You don't become reliable by announcing your values. You become reliable by honoring what you said you would do, even when no one is watching, even when the task is small enough to feel insignificant. Especially then, because small promises are where character either sharpens or dulls. When you break them, you quietly train yourself to distrust your own word. When you keep them, you reinforce an inner alignment that money can't buy and status can't fake. There's a calm confidence that comes from knowing you won't abandon yourself at the first sign of inconvenience. That confidence reads as grounded, attractive. Safe. People sense it before they understand it. You don't need grand gestures to build this habit. In fact, the smaller the promise, the more revealing it is. Anyone can rise to the occasion when the stakes are high and the audience is watching. But keeping the tiny commitments, the ones that feel optional, forgettable, or easy to postpone, is where discipline becomes identity. Seneca warned, "He who is brave is free." And bravery isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet courage to follow through when your mind tries to wiggle out. When you keep your word in these moments, you're telling yourself something important. You can be trusted. That message sinks deep. It steadies your nervous system. It changes how you speak, how you decide, how you carry yourself. You stop over-explaining. You stop over-promising. You become precise, intentional. There's an elegance in that restraint. You don't scatter your energy everywhere because you respect the cost of your word. And that restraint is magnetic. People are drawn to those who don't inflate their commitments just to look impressive, but also don't shrink from responsibility when it's time to act. If you want to strengthen this habit, start by shrinking the distance between intention and action. Make promises that are light enough to carry but solid enough to matter. Then treat them as non-negotiable. One practical exercise is to pause before agreeing to anything, even internally, and ask yourself if you are willing to follow through without resentment. If the answer is no, don't promise. That single pause will save you from future self-betrayal. Another exercise is to keep a private list, not of achievements but of commitments kept. No flair, no judgment, just evidence. Over time, that list becomes a mirror. You begin to see a pattern forming, and patterns shape identity. Epictetus reminded us, first say to yourself what you would be and then do what you have to do. This isn't about perfection. You will fail sometimes. The difference is what you do next. Do you rationalize and move on, or do you correct quickly and quietly? Repair matters. It preserves integrity. And integrity, when practiced consistently, becomes visible even when unspoken. What makes this habit quietly attractive is that it radiates stability. You're not chaotic. You're not unreliable. You don't need external pressure to do what you said you would do. That steadiness creates a sense of ease around you. People relax in the presence of someone whose word isn't slippery. And more importantly, you relax in your own presence. There's less internal noise, less guilt humming in the background, fewer mental tabs left open. You reclaim energy that used to leak through broken promises. Use that energy deliberately. At the end of each day, ask yourself one simple question. Did I live in alignment with what I said I would do today? No drama, no self-punishment, just clarity. Over time, this clarity compounds. You stop needing validation because your self-respect is intact. And self-respect has a gravity of its own. It doesn't flash. It doesn't shout. It just draws things toward it. Keep your promises, especially the small ones, and you won't need to convince anyone of your value. It will be felt. Number 7, you don't chase validation or attention. You don't chase validation or attention. And at first, that might sound passive, almost like you're withdrawing from the world. But it's the opposite. It's a quiet decision you make every day to stand on your own feet instead of leaning on applause. When you stop needing approval, something shifts in how you move, how you speak, how you carry yourself. You're no longer scanning the room for reactions. You're no longer adjusting your words to be liked. You're rooted, and people feel that before they even understand it. You become calmer, slower, harder to shake. Not because you're trying to impress, but because you're finally at ease with who you are without witnesses. There's a strange freedom that comes when you no longer need to be seen to feel real. You start choosing actions based on alignment instead of attention. You speak when there's something worth saying, not because silence feels uncomfortable. You let moments pass without announcing them. This is where attraction quietly grows. Not loud, not flashy, just steady. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "I do my duty, other things trouble me not." Read that again. Not because it sounds profound, but because it's a reminder that your worth was never meant to be outsourced. When you live this way, you stop performing and start inhabiting your own life. That's magnetic. Most people are exhausted from chasing reactions, likes, praise, reassurance, recognition, even disagreement sometimes just to feel acknowledged. When you opt out of that race, you conserve an enormous amount of energy. That energy shows up as presence, and presence is rare. When you're present, you listen without needing to interrupt. You respond instead of react. You're not in a hurry to prove anything. Seneca warned about this trap when he said, "He who depends on himself is the most powerful." Validation dependence is a subtle form of slavery. Freedom begins the moment you notice the urge to be validated and choose not to obey it. You don't need to announce that you don't seek attention. In fact, the moment you announce it, you're back in the same loop. This habit works because it's internal. It's you deciding again and again that you don't need permission to be who you are, that your values don't need a vote. That silence doesn't mean invisibility. When you stop chasing validation, your actions become cleaner. There's less noise in them, less desperation, less hidden bargaining. People trust that. They sense that you're not trying to extract something from them. And trust is far more attractive than approval. Attraction built on attention is fragile. It collapses the moment attention shifts elsewhere. But attraction built on self-respect has weight. You feel grounded because your sense of worth isn't swinging with every opinion. Epictetus put it plainly. If you want to be invincible, make yourself dependent on nothing that lies outside your own will. Read that slowly. Let it sink in. This isn't about arrogance or emotional coldness. It's about sovereignty. When you don't chase validation, you're no longer easy to manipulate, rush, or destabilize. You don't need constant reassurance, so you don't beg for it in subtle ways. You don't fish for compliments. You don't over-explain. You don't shrink or exaggerate yourself to be accepted. This habit also changes how you experience rejection or indifference. Instead of taking it as a verdict on your worth, you see it as information. Neutral, clean. You don't spiral. You don't compensate. You don't perform harder. You simply continue. That calm response is powerful. It signals emotional maturity. It says without words, "I'm okay either way." And paradoxically, that's when people lean in. Not because you're withholding, but because you're whole. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. You've been conditioned, like most people, to seek external confirmation. So you need practice. One simple exercise is to notice the impulse before you act. The urge to check, to share, to seek reassurance, to be acknowledged. Don't judge it, just notice it. Pause, breathe, ask yourself quietly, if no one noticed this, would I still do it? If the answer is yes, proceed. If the answer is no, let it go. That pause is where freedom is built. Another practice is voluntary silence. Not avoidance, not withdrawal, just intentional restraint. Choose moments where you could speak, explain, or justify yourself and consciously don't. Let your actions stand without commentary. This trains you to tolerate the discomfort of not being validated. Discomfort is the price of independence. Over time, that discomfort fades and what replaces it is steadiness. You can also practice self-validation daily. At the end of the day, reflect quietly on whether you acted in alignment with your values, not whether you were praised, not whether you were noticed. Alignment. Ask yourself, did I act with integrity today? If the answer is yes, let that be enough. This is very Stoic. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that external applause was irrelevant compared to inner order. When you adopt that standard, you stop needing the world to clap for you. As this habit deepens, something subtle happens. You stop trying to be attractive, and that's when you become it. There's no strain in you, no hunger, no need to prove, just a quiet confidence that doesn't announce itself. Money can buy attention. Status can demand it. But self-possession earns something better: respect, curiosity, trust. And those last longer, so start small. Catch the urge. Pause before posting, speaking, explaining. Let silence do some of the work. Let your choices be guided by principle instead of reaction. Remind yourself, as the Stoics did, that your worth is internal, stable, and non-negotiable. When you stop chasing validation, you stop leaking power. And when you stop leaking power, you become quietly, unmistakably attractive. Number 8, you stay disciplined. When motivation fades, you don't notice it at first, but something changes in you the moment you stop waiting to feel like doing the work. There's a quiet shift when you decide that discipline doesn't need permission from motivation. You stop bargaining with your moods. You stop asking whether today feels right. You move anyway. And that choice, small, private, almost invisible to others, is what begins to make you more attractive than money ever could. Because money impresses from the outside. Discipline reshapes you from the inside. You carry yourself differently when you know you'll keep promises to yourself even on days when your energy is low and your mind is noisy. You become steadier, calmer, less desperate for approval. You don't chase outcomes as much because you trust your process, and people can sense that. They may not be able to explain it, but they feel it when they're around you. Motivation is loud. It makes big speeches. It floods your mind with images of what could be. Discipline is quieter. It doesn't inspire you, it anchors you. Motivation shows up when conditions are perfect. Discipline shows up when they are. That's why relying on motivation keeps you stuck in cycles, up when you're inspired, down when you're not. Discipline cuts through that cycle. It says, I act because I decided to act, not because I feel like it today. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." When motivation fades, your mind tries to negotiate. Discipline ends the negotiation. You don't argue with yourself. You don't dramatize. You do what needs to be done, then you move on. That simplicity creates a kind of inner order, and inner order always reads as strength. When you stay disciplined without motivation, you stop being reactive. You're no longer pulled around by impulses, boredom, or temporary discomfort. You become predictable in the best way to yourself. That builds self-respect. And self-respect changes how you speak, how you listen, how you stand, how you walk into a room. You don't need to announce anything. You don't need to prove you're on the grind. There's a groundedness to you that comes from knowing you'll show up again tomorrow, regardless of mood. Seneca warned, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." Discipline is choosing the port and rowing even when the wind dies. That consistency makes you magnetic because consistency is rare. There's also a quiet confidence that forms when you stop romanticizing motivation. You stop telling yourself stories about waiting for the right time or the right feeling. You understand that feelings are weather. They change. Discipline is climate. It shapes the long-term conditions of your life. When you act without motivation, you prove to yourself that you're not fragile. You don't collapse when enthusiasm disappears. You don't need external pressure to function. Epictetus put it plainly: first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Not feel. Do. That mindset strips away excuses and replaces them with responsibility. And responsibility carried well is deeply attractive. This habit also sharpens your presence. You're not constantly distracted by internal debates about whether you should act. You decide once and execute. That mental clarity frees up attention. You listen better. You speak more deliberately. You're not scattered. You don't rush. You're not performing urgency. You embody patience. People trust those who move with patience because patience suggests control. Discipline teaches you to tolerate boredom, repetition, and slow progress. And the ability to tolerate those things quietly is one of the most underrated forms of power there is. To build this habit, you don't need dramatic overhauls. You need fewer rules and stronger follow-through. Start by defining a small, non-negotiable daily action, not something that excites you, something boring but useful. Decide in advance that this action happens whether you feel ready or not. When resistance shows up, and it will, don't argue with it. Acknowledge it and act anyway. The exercise is simple. Notice the urge to delay, then move your body before your mind finishes complaining. Over time, your brain learns that hesitation no longer controls your behavior. That rewiring is subtle, but it compounds. Another practice is to remove emotional language from your internal dialogue. Instead of saying, "I don't feel motivated," say, "I'm choosing to act without motivation." Words shape identity. The first sentence makes you passive. The second makes you deliberate. Repeat it until it becomes natural. You're not forcing yourself, you're choosing discipline. That distinction matters. Discipline chosen freely strengthens you. Discipline imposed breeds resentment. The Stoics never preached harshness for its own sake. They preached alignment with reason. Acting without motivation isn't punishment, it's clarity. You can also train discipline by ending tasks when you've decided, not when you feel satisfied. Stop waiting for the emotional payoff. Complete the action, then step away. This teaches your mind that completion doesn't depend on pleasure, it depends on commitment. Over time, you'll notice something unexpected. Motivation starts visiting you more often, but you're no longer dependent on it. You welcome it when it comes. You don't panic when it leaves. What makes this habit quietly attractive is that it changes your relationship with effort. You stop dramatizing difficulty. You stop turning every challenge into a test of willpower. You simply do what aligns with who you've decided to become. That identity, someone who acts regardless of mood, seeps into everything. You become less reactive in conversations, less needy in relationships, less shaken by setbacks. Money can amplify status, but discipline stabilizes character. And character is what people trust when things get uncertain. In the end, staying disciplined when motivation fades is a form of self-leadership. You're not waiting to be pushed. You're not waiting to be inspired. You're already moving, quietly, consistently. That's why this habit doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It shows up in how you live, how you decide, and how you carry yourself through ordinary days. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. You don't need motivation to do that. You need resolve, and once you build it, people will feel it, long before they ever notice what you own. Number 9, you move with patience, not urgency. There's a quiet power in the way you move through the world when you stop rushing. Not the kind of power that demands attention, but the kind that pulls it in without effort. When you move with patience instead of urgency, something subtle changes in how you're perceived, and more importantly, in how you experience yourself. You're no longer reacting to life as if it's chasing you. You're meeting it on your own terms. You begin to signal, without saying a word, that you are not desperate for outcomes, approval, or validation. And that calm self-possession is deeply attractive in a way money can never replicate. Urgency is loud. It leaks anxiety. It announces, "I'm afraid of missing out," or worse, "I need this to go my way." Patience, on the other hand, whispers confidence. It says you trust time, you trust yourself. You trust that what's meant for you doesn't require panic or force. When you slow your movements, your decisions, even your internal pace, you stop broadcasting neediness. You stop moving like someone who's behind. Instead, you move like someone who knows they'll arrive exactly when they're supposed to. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." Urgency is future-obsessed. It drags tomorrow's fears into today's body. Patience keeps you rooted. You act, but you don't scramble. You decide, but you don't rush. You're present enough to choose deliberately rather than react impulsively. That presence shows. People feel it before they can explain it. When you move patiently, your actions gain weight. Nothing feels frantic. Nothing feels forced. You give the impression, accurate or not, that you've already won something internally. You're not trying to outrun discomfort. You're not afraid of silence or pauses. You allow moments to breathe. That breathing room makes others lean in, not because you're doing more, but because you're doing less with intention. Urgency often disguises itself as productivity. It pretends to be ambition. But most of the time, it's just fear wearing a busy costume. Fear of falling behind, fear of being overlooked, fear of not being enough. Patience cuts through that illusion. Seneca warned, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Moving with patience doesn't mean moving slowly for the sake of it. It means refusing to waste energy on panic. It means conserving your attention for what actually matters. You don't need to hurry your words. You don't need to rush your decisions. You don't need to speed walk through life like it's about to close its doors. When you stop moving like you're late, you start moving like you belong. And that sense of belonging to yourself, to your pace, to your values is magnetic. People are drawn to those who seem settled inside their own skin. Patience also sharpens your judgment. When you're not in a rush, you notice more. You hear what's actually being said, not just what confirms your assumptions. You feel when something is off before it becomes a problem. Epictetus reminded us, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Urgency is a loss of self-mastery. Patience is discipline made visible. It's restraint in motion. It's strength that doesn't need to flex. There's another layer to this habit that rarely gets talked about. Moving with patience communicates abundance. Not material abundance, but internal abundance. It tells the world that you don't believe every opportunity is your last chance. You don't cling. You don't chase. You allow things to unfold. That mindset alone can change how you walk into rooms, how you sit, how you respond. You stop grasping for control and start exercising it quietly. You don't need to convince anyone of your value when your behavior already reflects it. Calm movements, unhurried responses, decisions made after thought, not impulse. These are signals of someone who trusts their own trajectory, someone who doesn't need to rush because they're not racing against insecurity. This habit isn't about pretending to be calm. It's about training yourself to actually be calm. That takes practice. It takes awareness. It takes a willingness to feel discomfort without immediately trying to escape it through speed. The moment you feel the urge to hurry, that's your cue to slow down. That's where the work is. Start with your body. The body always reveals urgency first. Notice how you move when you're anxious, tight, fast, shallow. Then choose to do the opposite. Move deliberately. Breathe slower than feels necessary. Let your movements finish fully before starting the next one. This isn't about performance, it's about regulation. When your body slows, your mind follows. Then bring patience into your decisions. You don't need to respond immediately. You don't need to decide on the spot. Create a habit of pausing even briefly before you act. That pause is power. It's the space where wisdom shows up. Marcus Aurelius advised, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Patience gives you time to question that estimate instead of obeying it. Another practice is intentional delay, not procrastination but conscious waiting. When you feel rushed internally, delay action just long enough to regain clarity. Ask yourself whether speed is actually required or whether it's just familiar. Most urgency is optional. Patience reveals that. Train yourself to be comfortable with unfinished moments. Not everything needs closure right now. Not every tension needs resolution today. Sit with that. Let it stretch you. This is where real confidence is built, not in constant motion, but in stillness that doesn't panic. You can also rehearse patience mentally. At the start of your day, remind yourself that nothing important requires frenzy. Set the intention to move calmly regardless of external pace. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." Choose to be fully where you are at the speed that allows awareness. That alone will separate you from the crowd. As this habit takes root, you'll notice a shift. You won't feel as easily pulled. You won't feel as reactive. You'll feel grounded. And others will feel it too, even if they can't name it. Patience has a presence. It fills space without noise. It suggests depth. It hints at inner order. You don't need wealth to create that effect. You don't need status. You don't need attention. You just need to stop moving like you're afraid of time. When you move with patience, you reclaim your rhythm. You stop being pushed by the clock and start walking alongside it. This is one of those habits that works quietly, almost invisibly, until one day you realize something has changed. You're less tense, more deliberate, more attractive in a way that doesn't fade when circumstances change. Because this kind of attractiveness isn't borrowed, it's built, slowly, patiently, on purpose. Number 10, you stay grounded whether you win or lose before you chase money, status, or approval. Pause for a second. Because real attraction doesn't announce itself. It doesn't flex. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It settles into the room quietly, and people feel it before they understand it. If you practice these habits, you won't need to prove anything. Your presence will speak for you. Your calm will do the work. Your discipline will be felt long before your words ever are. As Marcus Aurelius reminded us, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. That's the game, become it. Don't advertise it, so don't rush this. Pick one habit, just one, practice it daily. Let it reshape how you carry yourself, how you listen, how you move through the world. Over time, people will trust you more, respect you more, feel drawn to you without knowing why. If this video resonated with you, stay here. There's more ahead, more lessons, more quiet power to build. And remember, money can impress, but character lingers.